This video is about the installation of auxiliary items that you might put on your RTV X-series. And I'm going to show you how I did mine. Yours might be very similar if you're any of the X. This is 1120. If you're 900 or some of the other X-series, the design should be the same, and you might want to take use of some of the tips and all that I have that I used for mine. So I'm going to talk specifically about adding this light bar up on the roll bar and what I did and some of the things that I had to encounter. I've actually got plans to put more lights on as well, but let me go through what I did for this one. For this, as you can see, the light came, I bought this off of eBay. I think this is made out of aluminum. I did not include the little rubber piece that's on there, and it gave me a little bit of a groove to put this on. I did this about a year ago, and I put a bolt all the way through the tube. And what I did for this piece here, for my so-called washer, is I took a piece of pipe. It's about a 2 3/8, I think it was, and I cut it, and it turned out to be the right radius for putting over this. I think this is a 2-inch tube right here, and then I just drilled straight through, putting it all the way through, getting that connected. So that was the way that I wanted to do that. Make sure I wasn't going to crimp or I wasn't going to pull on this tube at all, and make sure that was sealed. So I did put some sealer around there when I put that in. And then the electrical comes from the light here. The only thing I will say in terms of the light is that you have to start to make some adjustments when you get in and out, because you might bump it, but once you bump it your head about 2, 3, 4 times, pretty soon you remember to duck your head all the time. So what I did was I actually took this tube, which is connected to this other tube here. I took this and I removed it and did all my work off of the vehicle, but I drilled a hole, and then as you see I put some silicone sealer around there when I put that back in. So it's, well, I see that it's actually come off loose a little bit, but I wanted to try to keep the moisture and such out, and that worked pretty well. So this wire goes inside, and then what I did was I connected it with some connectors so that if I take this off, that I can disconnect the electrical power. So in here is where I have some connectors that kind of look like this here, and these spades. So what I did was this is for the rear bar, which is going to be on my auxiliary. I'm going to put the same set of lights back here, but I kind of did the same concept that you see right here. Was I ran the wire, I've got a red and a black, and they go inside of the tube. In this case they go down the tube, and I wanted to get this all the way down and try to go down through here, but what I found is that the way they designed this roll bar is that the tube actually has a block right here, and this is where the weld is, and I kept running into that. So what I ended up doing, and I don't remember whether I had removed this plastic dash or not in order to get to it, but I drilled a hole right here, and then I bent it so that any water that might get in there, whatever, will come back out, or if the rainwater should run down and hit this, that it will basically run down the wires and keep it out of the tube, so that it didn't have any water accumulation. So you can see what I did here. There's 4 wires. There's 2 blacks and 2 reds, one for the front bar light and one that's going to be for the back bar. So that's what I ended up doing that, and I ran it underneath the dash. These are my light controls for the front and for the back. So those I bought off of eBay as well. There's already some holes here that I utilized, and since it's right next to my headlights, then it's convenient because it's the same concept of the functionality. I have all my lights switches right here. Now the way that I've got this set up right now is that you can see that it does turn on and without the engine running, and that's the way I wanted it. I chose to do that. So let me talk about some of the other things that I did in order to make this work. So let me show you what I've done around the electrical underneath the dash. So this is going to be on the back side of this is where the switches are that are on the dash. And what I ended up doing was I got myself a couple relays, not knowing how much power required, and that turned out to be overkill. These actually are 40 amps. The light bar is using 120 watts, so 120 divided by 12 volts means that they're using 10 amps. And what I found out later when I ordered the switches back there is that the switches are good for 20 amps. So they actually could have handled the 10 amps that the light required, and I didn't even need these. But here's what I did anyway, just in case you're curious and you've got maybe an application which does need some relays. But the light bar, sorry, the roll bar wires are back here. These are the reds and blacks. They're coming on. The black is grounded here. I drilled myself a hole through here and installed a nut and a bolt and then a wing nut so that I could add grounds if I wanted to, because I wanted a convenient ground to be able to use for all these things. So that's the route of the wires. Then I've got my relays set in here. The yellow here is actually my battery power, and that comes from the fuse box area. It's following the same route as this cable here, which is my parking brake cable. So it goes underneath the body, the belly pan. So it comes up. So in general, the yellow is going to be my full-time battery, red is going to be my load, black and white are going to be the control for the relay. So this white goes to the switch and this black over here goes to the ground. That's in principle the way that I've set all of this stuff up. So just want to let you know how I did that. But I mounted these up. I drilled some holes, put some self-tapping screws in here, kept it nice and neat, keep it out of the way. You see I've still got plenty of space out here, and it's easy to access and to be able to get to. So the next thing you're going to want to know is how I'm getting power to that, and this is what I ended up doing. Is if you lift both seats, then you're going to have a tray in here, and I've removed the tray already, but then you have this piece here, and once you remove this, there we go, then you're going to have access to your fuse panels. And so these are relays here, and these are fuses in here. And I need a screwdriver to open that up. But what I ended up doing is I looked in there were some blanks in there, and I could not find anything that would give me the pins, that the terminal pins that I could connect a wire and actually add my own fuses in here. So what I ended up doing was I took a main power that was coming out of here. So what I did was I removed the screws and lifted this whole box out, which gave me a great big bundle of cables. And this is actually for yet a future item here. But when I went to the auto store and I bought this one happens to be very heavy duty. I don't know what this is. This might be about a 12 gauge, 14 gauge wire. And this one doesn't have any fuse in here, so I'm not doing anything with that. And since I didn't have any space on it, that ended up at the top. But what I did was there's a big heavy white wire in here. There's on this side, well, let me go ahead and open this up. Okay, there we go. I went ahead and opened it up. But you see there's some blanks in here that are not being used, and they don't have any kind of metal in here to be able to install my own fuses. which was my preferred way of doing it. But because I didn't have that, over on this side there are some really heavy wires, maybe a 10 gauge or so, that's coming up in here, coming up and going back down and running through these 60 amp fuses. And this fuse here happens to be the main fuse. So imagine what happens is the battery comes into the fuse, goes back out again, but then it supplies this fuse, which is another 60 amp. I couldn't figure out why they would do it that way, but then this fuse goes to some other items. So what I ended up doing was I took my main power from the battery. I didn't want to go all the way back to the battery because I wanted it kind of be this associated up in here. So if I remove this out, underneath there's a little bit of a space, and so I was able to shove two of these. I wired this into the main, I call it the main wire that goes to the battery, which is full-time power, and so then I tapped into that, and I actually have three of these. This is the third one, but two underneath this box are sitting down there in that little cavity, and I was able to run those, and then because I have those two, they go to those two yellow wire supplies that you saw up underneath the hood. So that's the way I ended up doing the power portion of this. Another note about these wires that go down, you'll notice that they're kind of heading in the same direction as this parking brake. The parking brake is actually cable that goes down through the middle underneath the belly of the vehicle. I used that same route to do this, so what I had to do was underneath the vehicle I had to take my belly pan off, and what I did was I ran that along with some of the other cables that are down there, like the parking brake cable and the shift cable for the four-wheel drive. So I ran them down through this slot here underneath, and I used zip ties to keep it up close and tight and well organized. And then it came out. Once I had the belly pan off, then it was easy to find the fuse box and be able to connect it in with the fuse box. So that's the route that I took in getting the power up here, with the shortest amount of distance and the most convenient and protected way of getting it there. So there you go. So to now to operate this, all I need to do is come over here. I can turn the light on, and you'll see that it's working and operating, and turn it off so I don't have to have the vehicle running. And then I've got these pilot lights here that tells me that it's been turned on, and hopefully that won't be something that I overlook during the daylight. Anyway, that was that particular project, and that's how I do my auxiliary power item. Let's talk about running the wire through the roll bar. The roll bar is made up of three parts. There's a front bar, there's a rear bar, which I've already removed, and then there's the sides. Actually, I guess that would make a four because there's a left and a right. And what I did in order to run my wires down through here and drill my hole that's sitting at the bottom here is I actually removed both the top bars, and then I removed this entire side. And to do that, let me just describe what I ended up doing. If you go back here to the back, there's 3 screws here. That's fine, but you have to remove this, you have to remove this. All of this has to go in order for you to get that out. But then the other part is, oh, and also you have to deal with the seat belt there. But the other part is that when you look underneath the front here, you will see that there's 2 screws right here. This actually is the bar itself, so you have to remove those 2 screws, and then it all can come out. So if you want to do some drilling, or if you want to do some custom modification work, whatever with that bar, or you run your wires through there, and actually if you run your wires through, that's fine, but you're going to have to deal with how to get the wire out, which is what I ended up doing right here. So the way that I got this hole in here and then bent it so that the water will be deflected away from going inside the bar was to actually remove the bar. That's what I ended up doing.